Hello, Paulette Downey back again, part 2 on demonic spirit, the spirit of heaviness. So as I was saying, we have to keep moving. So even though whatever it is that we are going through, we have to keep moving. We have to keep doing what it is God has set for us to do. Whatever course, because if we stop moving, that's it, it's over. That's it, life is over when we stop moving. So, this is why it's important to recognize when you're depressed due to external factors. It's understandable. We all get there. But to not allow ourselves to stay in this place of depression. And this is, like I said, where we have the choice and the power to not allow ourselves to stay there. And one of the best ways to do that is to continue our relationship with God, continue our walk with God, to trust God when absolutely nothing makes sense. And actually, you know what, there's another thing. I just want to read this. This is actually before I go on to the second point that I want to make. So this one is also in Philippians. So this is in Philippians as well. And it is, just give me a second here. Sorry. Okay, so this is 4 as well. So this is Philippians 4, and it is 4:11 to 13. And this is basically the Apostle Paul talking about him being in every situation. Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I now know how to live on almost nothing, or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or an empty, with plenty or with little, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. So when we learn how to when we learn how to not focus on the situation that we are going through, and when we focus ourselves on Jesus, and we allow Him to give us the grace and the strength to go through whatever it is, when we focus ourselves on Him and not on the situation shrinks. The situation it shrinks. We give a situation power when we focus on it, which then will pull us into a state of depression. But when we fix our eyes on God, then whatever situation that we're in, it shrinks in size. It doesn't go away. I'm not saying it's going to go away. I'm not saying that it disappears. We still have to keep moving, of course. But the situation will not appear to be so much in despair and hopelessness when we are focusing on Jesus. And then He will give us the ability to live through whatever situation we are going through, like Paul said, little or lot, nothing or, whatever. But we will be able to go through it without becoming depressed, without going into a state of depression, because we have now fixed our eyes on Jesus. So while we're going to experience depression, but it is very important to not allow ourselves to stay depressed and to rely on Jesus and to continue to pray. And worship music is a great way, an absolutely great way of breaking depression. Or not breaking the feeling, to uplift our spirits. But the more we focus on Jesus, the less we focus on the situation, and then the less we feel in a state of despair and hopelessness, and the less we feel the spirit of heaviness. But if we do not do that, then we are going to slip into the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is discouragement. So if we are not focused on Jesus in that way, we are going to go into a spirit of discouragement. And so what does discouragement look like? So as I said, when we start to believe that we can't get out of the situation that we are in, that things are not going to change for us. And, as Christians, especially, with a lot, and this is in life too. I know with Christians, because we're depending so much on God, and when we're expecting a certain outcome, and when we don't see that certain outcome, then we begin to question. Do we begin to question? Some of us, all. Does God really exist? Because why would he allow us to go through this? Does he not care? Why is he so silent? Why is he not doing anything? And because we expect a situation to turn out one way, and because it's not working the way we expect it to, that can take us into a situation of discouragement, because we're just basically saying, where is God? Why hasn't God shown up for us? And, because he hasn't shown up for us, what's going to happen? I thought that this situation would have been over by now, or I thought that this would have happened by now, or I thought that this, wouldn't be the way it is. So because things didn't turn out or are not working out the way we expected, if we're not careful, we will go into this area of discouragement and say, okay, what's going on? What's next? Since God didn't show up, what am I to do? What's going to happen here? And, we may give up on trusting God. We may give up on what it is we're pursuing. We may give up on living. We may give up on believing. We may give up on moving forward as a result of that. And when we get into that state of discouragement, a number of things can happen. I mean, you can, a lot of substance abuse, a lot of different types of substance abuse can happen. A lot of types of addictions can happen. A lot of types of things that people get involved in will happen at this stage. If we slip into this and we don't, cry out to God and continue to just trust in him and believe in him. So it's very important that we not allow ourselves to slip into this stage, because this stage is a stage where, when you're becoming discouraged, because you're seeing the situation that you're in, you're seeing what's going around you, and you're seeing that nothing is changing and things may just be getting worse. And so, what are you going to do? How am I going to get out of this? God is not helping me. God's not doing anything for me. So God has abandoned me. So why should I pray anymore? Why should I, why should I live for God anymore? Why not just do it on my own? And when we do it on our own, when we take ourselves out of the will of God, that's when we are in danger of so many things going wrong in our lives. So when we are going into a spirit, when discouragement starts to creep into our lives, that's when Satan really can have his way with us. That's when Satan really can, work inside of you and have and take you into another direction, which is going to cause nothing but destruction. This has happened to a lot of Christians. This has happened to a lot of pastors and people in senior level and high levels in Christianity, when they work at a church or various spiritual outlets. This has happened to a lot of people who are Christians when they see God not moving, when they see that things aren't going right. And and it happens a lot to a lot of pastors. A lot of pastors do experience this. I've learned, with pastors, and this is another thing, with a lot of pastors, it's so sad because a lot of the pastors, they do go to seminary. And so a lot of them they receive, a lot of them have gone to university, they have their bachelor's in theology. And then when they, pastor churches, they're dealing with so many, depressing stories. So many people are coming up to them, sharing their life stories with them, sharing things with them. The people who they are pastoring are coming up to them with stories that are so discouraging. And then they're also going through stuff as well. And then they get at a point where they're like, okay, where is God? And so, yes, they went to seminary and they have BAs in theology, but they never experienced, God at a supernatural level. So yes, they have all of the head knowledge. They have all of the knowledge regarding the Bible, and which is important. You need the Bible. You need to know the Bible when you are pastoring. But they don't have the supernatural connection and relationship with God. A lot of them, they don't even have that Holy Spirit, like that burning in them. And so they don't have that, like they're not hearing the voice of God. And so, they just wonder, like, what, does God even exist? And you get a lot of pastors after, having a BA in theology saying, does God really exist? Because why would he allow all this to happen? I'm not hearing him. My life is dead. I don't feel any kind of connection with him. And so this is when we're getting into that whole discouragement area, and you start to question your existence. You start to question God's existence. You start to question, does God care? And this is where it's so important that we develop that kind of relationship with God where we can feel him at that supernatural level when we are feeling his presence. And like, look, you're not going to feel the presence like, 24/7. You're not going to see, miracles and signs and wonders, day after day. You're not going to see all of that. And we have to also learn, but you do want to be able to connect with God at a supernatural level. So it's important so that for yourself, you know that yes, you are connected with him, because it's not always, it's going to be quiet. There are going to be seasons, like even though, you hear the voice of God, you're not going to always hear him. There are going to be times of silence. There are going to be times when you're not going to hear anything from God. And, these are often testing times, but you have to trust. You have to trust that he is who he says he is. And you have to also look back on the history that you've had with him, the times when he has talked with you, the times when he has pulled you out of situations, the time when he has opened doors, the times when he has, whispered things to you. But this is not going to be like an always, thing. And we have to also learn how to not rely on that. But at the same time, we do want that in our lives. And we do need that in our lives in order to be able to continue this walk with him. So this is why it is so important that we cultivate a relationship with Jesus Christ, where we are praying to God on a daily basis, where we are reading the Bible on a daily basis, when we're listening to worship music and reading books that Christians have written on about God, and listen to sermons and just try to take in as much as we can about God to draw him closer to us, because when we draw close to him, he draws close to us. When we draw near to him, he draws near to us. And that's when we are able to feel his presence. And that's when we are opening up the portals where we can hear him. And it's not so much audible, like, you hear me talking now. That can happen. He can do that. He has done that. But you hear him in the spirit. You can hear him audibly inside, but it's just a knowing. It's just in the spirit. But we do need to make sure that we cultivate a close relationship with God, so that we know that yes, he truly does exist, and that will prevent us from getting in to that state of discouragement. And with a lot of people who are followers, even people who aren't followers, but when they see that life is not working the way they had thought it should work, or they expected it to be, then they become discouraged. And once you get into that discouragement, that's where Satan really can have his way with you. And that's where, he can open you up to a world of really death and destruction without you even knowing it, because you're going to want to numb whatever it is that you're going through. And so it's very important that we not allow ourselves to get to that state of discouragement, because with that, and I mean, it could end like in so many destructive ways, like I said, with addictions, substance abuse, like so many sinful ways of living, a lifestyle that is completely and totally not of God. It could even relate to even lead you to suicide as a result of the despair, not believing that there is God, not believing that there's no reason to even live, and as a result of that, causing someone to end their own life. So it's very important that we not get to that place. And how we don't go to that place is by continuing our walk with God and trusting him, even when things aren't making sense. Because with God, like, first and foremost, he is real. God is very real. He's real. But God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. How he thinks is not how we think. And he sees things we don't see. So what may not make sense to us at the time, because he doesn't share everything with us at once. He doesn't let us in to what is going on all at once. And so because we don't know why things are going the way they are going, we kind of think it's going against us, when it is always going for us. When we are walking with God, everything is working out in our favor, even though it may not look like it. When you are walking with God, when you have a relationship with God, and when everything looks like it's falling apart, it's not. It's working in your favor. You just can't see it as of yet. So you just continue to stick with them. You continue to grow with them. You continue. It's just like, when you put a seed in soil. And, like I know as a kid, we had those like experiments, science, like we had those like science fairs and everything like that. And we had those little, where we would plant something and, water it every day, and you wouldn't see anything. And it's like, what's happening? What's going on? I don't see anything. Like, I'm watering this, I'm giving it love. I would even give it like plant food and everything, and I wouldn't see anything. It's like days and days would go on. And it's like, I'm doing everything I can to grow this plant, and it is not growing. What is going on? What am I doing? I'm doing something wrong because this plant isn't growing. Sometimes I would see other people and their plants would grow, because they were all like different plants. And then, maybe like 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, then my plant would start to grow, And so even though it didn't look like anything was happening, I was watering my plant, I was giving my plant, like food, and it wasn't doing anything. And I know many of you who, during your in school, you may have had those similar science, little for science fairs, you had to do that as well. But my plant did grow, but it took longer than when everyone else's grew. And so just because it didn't look like anything was going on, and that somehow my plant was, I thought there was something wrong with my seed. There was nothing wrong with my seed. It was just that my seed was a different one. And so that is the same with, with life. So sometimes you may be working at something, and you may be doing something, and you may be putting all into something, or sometimes you may, and nothing is happening, and sometimes everything looks like it's falling apart. But if you just keep going at it, if you just keep going, and many people can speak of this. There are many people who, own huge businesses can say the same thing. They had to keep, trying and keep working and keep, pushing and moving forward. And eventually, you just keep moving, and eventually things will work. Things will go. Things that are not pleasant will disappear. But you have to keep moving and keep trusting in God in order to see, yourself coming into the light and see things working out in your favor. So yes, so the spirit of heaviness, discouragement is where we will go if we do not check ourselves. When we are going through any kind of, forms of depression or spiritual heaviness, when we don't make, check ourselves and maybe speak to someone, pray, whatever. So it's important that we reach out, that we pray, spend time with God, so that the spirit of discouragement does not creep into our lives and then take over it, because Satan, once he's got you discouraged, that's when he can have his way with you. So now the final one, when we are talking about depression, our spirit of heaviness, is when we are talking about clinical depression. So clinical depression is hereditary. It is something that is in the DNA. This is a demonic spirit. This is something, demonic spirit, or, like an ancestral curse, something that's been passed down. And, there are people who are Christians who suffer from clinical depression, who suffer with the spiritual heaviness. And people wonder, why, how can someone who is a follower of Jesus Christ, deal with it? Why would they have such a thing? And, it's unfair for us to look at someone who is a Christian and who is dealing with that. It is unfair for us to say that because they are a Christian, they should not be going through that. Because we don't know. We don't know why they are going through it. But we don't know why they're going through it, so we should not judge. Because like I said, with clinical depression, this is something that has been passed on through, it's in the genes, it's in the DNA. There's a history attached to this. So this is something that requires, this is something that people can be delivered from, for sure. This is something, just like all forms of deliverance, even when we're talking about things like, you've got things like ancestral curses of poverty, and these have been broken off of people's lives as well. But these types of ancestral curses take a lot of prayer and fasting. So this is not something that someone can overcome at once. A lot of prayer, a lot of fasting. This is something that people can be delivered from, for sure. But it's not something that can just be delivered by a prayer, or by a fast. This is something that would have to take a lot of time, with prayer, with fasting, seeking out someone, who, deals with deliverance, seeking out a pastor, and really, like, even looking into the lineage, I think would be a good way to find out exactly, if possible, if there's somebody who was around who could possibly find out as to, no, if there's somebody around from, like a grandparent or great grandparent or something, who could share what actually took place in their life that caused it. Because usually, even though it's been passed down, there was someone in that family line who actually went through something as to, why they have it, and then they passed it on, and then it just became something that was passed on throughout the generations. But yes, finding out the history as to exactly how it happened, why, in many that would be a good one. But there is deliverance. There is definitely deliverance from those who are suffering from clinical depression. Now, when I went back, I missed something that I wanted to speak on when I was talking about discouragement. I just thought about it now. The prophet Elijah, like he actually was noted as being very depressed throughout his good part of his life. After he defeated the 400 Baal worshippers, after he defeated them, and Jezebel threatened to kill him. And then when he ran for his life to get away from her, and he was exhausted. Like he basically, he was exhausted. He didn't want to continue. He didn't want to continue his role as a prophet. Like he was depressed. He was tired. He was like defeating those, after that defeat. That was exhausting. And for anyone who is, part of the fivefold ministry, and they're doing the work of God, they're coming up against a lot of attacks by Satan. You can't imagine the kind of attacks that people who are working under the fivefold ministry, what kind of attacks that these people receive by Satan. In so many ways. So there was a number of attacks. And so there were a number of attacks that he was experiencing, of course, too, and Jezebel being one of them. But there are a lot of attacks. They may not look like when you see these people, they may not look like they're being attacked, but there's a lot of spiritual attacks. They can manifest in so many ways that they are going through. And so spiritually, they're spiritually exhausted, and sometimes physically exhausted, depending on the severity or the things that they're dealing with, and mentally exhausted. So Elijah was at that point where he was all three. And so he was actually a prophet who actually was depressed. He was depressed. So he actually went through that as well. And he was just tired, and he just didn't want to do what he was doing anymore as a result of the exhaustion that he had went through, he had lived through. The fear that he didn't need to have. He didn't need to have a fear for his life. God had him. He was protected. There was nothing Jezebel could do to him. But that, as I was talking about discouragement, because he somehow fixed his eyes off of God, and he allowed the spirit of discouragement to enter into his life, causing him to have that fear of Jezebel. Because he didn't have to run. He didn't have to leave. There was nothing Jezebel could do to him. She couldn't kill him. She didn't have that power to kill him, And so, but he became afraid of her simply because he was so tired and he was so exhausted. And that's why he ran. He was tired. He was exhausted. He didn't have to run. That's why God, when he actually got to the brook, and God said to him, why are you here? Like, why are you here? Like, Elijah, why are you here? He meant, why did you run? Why did you leave? Why did you let Jezebel chase you from where you were to here? Because you had no reason to run from Jezebel. There's nothing Jezebel can do to you. So that's basically what he was saying. Like, that's basically what God was saying. Why are you here? Why are you not back there? Why did you run from her? There's nothing she can do to you. She has no power. She has no control over you. There's nothing, you're protected. So that's basically what God was saying to him when he said, why are you here? Why are you not back there? But he was tired, he was exhausted, and he was depressed. And so he took his eyes off of God. And as a result, he became fearful. And the fear chased him away. He actually became fearful of Jezebel, someone who had no power to do anything to him because of his exhaustion and because of his fear. And see, these are the things that, when we allow this kind of depression to get into us, it can, take us off route. And so he didn't need to do that. He didn't need to run from him. And so this is why it's important that, yes, when we're going through stuff, when we're going through things, allow ourselves to go through it. Like, let's not pretend that we're not going through it, because if we don't, we can't resolve what it is we're going through. And so we need to go through it. We need to speak with God. We need God to, speak back to us and give us direction and, help us and help to build us. But then we need to move forward to prevent Satan from getting from getting entry into us, and then allowing him to have his way. So yes, I wanted to talk about that one. I forgot, with the spirit of, in the spirit of discouragement. But yes, back to clinical depression. So clinical depression, there is deliverance for clinical depression, just like there's deliverance for, all the other types of mental illnesses that are out there. Just like there is healings for all various diseases, just like there's breakthroughs and everything, there is healing. There is deliverance for clinical depression. But this, again, like I said, it's not something that, like someone can't just pray this away. And it's not like temporary depression, something that is brought forth because of external events. This is something that an individual lives with. This is something chronic. It's something that the person is dealing with constantly throughout their life on a year-to-year basis. So there is deliverance for this, but it's just going to take much prayer, much fasting, maybe seeking someone out who is in the deliverance ministry to receive deliverance. But there's definitely help there for anyone who is going through any type of mental, like any kind of clinical depression or spiritual heaviness. I also strongly advise, for anyone who's going through any kind of clinical depression, God is the only one who can deliver. He's the only one, and like I said, he can do it. But also I advise, that, speak to like a Christian psychotherapist, to help with, someone to talk to and, to deal with it at a clinical level. But yes, for sure, there is God, only God can deliver. And I just want to, like anyone out there who's going through any kind of depression, anyone who's going through any kind of depression at all, like I said, find a good church, depend on God, but also, get any kind of, I'm just going to give out some numbers here. I have something here. And so any kind of depression, actually, you know what, I think I'm gonna just kind of make a note of it in my YouTube, like under, like comments. I think I'll make a note, because there is like a 988, like a lifeline you just dial 988, and you can also text 988 as well. But I think what I'm going to do, no, I'm not think, I'm more than think, I am. I'm actually going to write in info about places that you can contact if you are dealing with severe depression. If you're dealing with depression whatsoever, and you feel that you need somebody to speak with, you can text 988, dial 988. But like I said, I'm going to make a note of it for these places, these numbers in which you can contact, and places that you can reach out to speak with someone. But also, I strongly recommend find a very good church. If you do not belong to a church, find a very good church and plant yourself in that church, and read your Bible, and pray daily. Also, if you're going through any kind of severe depression, if you're feeling bad, worship music. Oh my goodness, worship music will help to really, really break those chains, alleviate any kind of depression that you're feeling. Worship music is amazing. That's pretty much all I have to say on the demonic spirit of spiritual heaviness. And so now I want to talk briefly about becoming a follower of Jesus Christ. If you are not a follower of Jesus Christ, I highly implore you become one. It will be the best decision you have ever made in your life. Give Jesus a year of your life. Give him a year